Welcome to today's press briefing. We have two doctors with us. Dr. Albert Au, Principal Medical and Health Officer, Communicable Disease Branch for Centre for Health Protection, and Dr. Sarah Ho, Chief Manager of Hospital Authority. They will give you an update on HA situation and COVID cases. We start with Dr. Ho. Good afternoon. We have 2,885 patients in our facilities. 343 of them are new patients. For those requiring isolation facilities, 528 of them are in isolation wards. 203 are in second-tier wards. 567 in Hong Kong North End Town Hospital, Hong Kong Infectious Control Center. 205 patients in Treatment Center for COVID in Asia World Expo. 236 of them are newly confirmed cases. We also reported 5 more patients in critical condition, 5 patients in serious condition, and among the infirmed, 52 patients are in critical condition, 61 in serious condition, and 13 patients in critical condition are receiving intensive care. Princess Margaret Hospital received a 10-year-old boy for COVID, and the patient has made progress. He no longer relies on breathing support, and as he no longer relies on high-level oxygen support, his condition is now regarded as serious instead of critical. And the boy is sober, and then CT scan would be MRI scan would be arranged. And we'd like to appeal to parents to take their children to get vaccinated as quickly as possible, especially for children who is immunocompromised or who suffer from chronic illnesses. That is because for children, they have a lower awareness or self-care ability in observing social distancing measures, hence a high risk of infection and transmission. Inoculation is an effective way to minimize the chance of widespread transmission after a child has been infected, and it is also effective in guarding against the risk of the confirmed cases becoming severe, dying, or suffering from long COVID. So they should complete the vaccination regime as quickly as possible so as to boost their immunity barrier and to give them the best protection. We also reported 10 more death cases comprising of 5 males and 5 females, aged 52 to 95. 5 of the deceased did not complete the 3-dose vaccination regime. Among them, there was a younger female patient, a 52-year-old female patient. She had cancer at the metastasis stage, spreading to the abdomen and the bones, and she also had abdominal edema in the lungs as well as in the abdomen. And on the 10th of September, the patient was confirmed, and unfortunately she passed away on the 12th. As of yesterday, 202 patients have recovered, including 172 who have been discharged. There are also 5 more patients identified as testing positive for COVID through hospital admission screening, and 8 in the ward have been listed as close contacts. 181 HA staff members have tested positive, and 102 of them have returned to the positions. I'll give the floor to Dr. Au. Thank you, Dr. Ho. Good afternoon. I will now give you COVID cases update as of the 12th of September. As of yesterday, we recorded 7,067 local infections, including 1,934 PCR positive cases and 5,133 RAT positive cases. 151 imported cases were recorded yesterday, including 137 PCR positives and 14 RAT positives. As for death cases, we recorded 10 more death cases as of yesterday, as mentioned by Dr. Ho. So since the start of the fifth wave, we have recorded altogether 9,607 death cases in Hong Kong. And among the 151 imported cases, 55 were picked up at the TSCC at the airport, 43 picked up in quarantine hotels or quarantine centers, 53 other cases tested positive as identified in the community treatment vaccination centers, and we have 46 specimens taken on the 4th to 7th day positive, and also we have 41 countries importing cases, 22 from UK, 16 from the Philippines, and also 14 from the US, and also 38 other countries imported fewer than 10 cases. As of yesterday, we had cases in 10 residential care homes, including 7 for the elderly, involving 14 residents and 7 staff members, and 3 homes for the disabled, involving 3 residents. 97 residents in these 10 homes have been listed as close contact. They will be quarantined. We have North District 中華基督教天平怡康之家 1 resident testing positive. In Yuen Long 基督教仁愛護理院 2 residents positive. In Wong Tai Sin 松陵萬寧護老中心 1 resident positive. 葵涌鋪亮曲樂安居暨盛長者日間護理中心 is a daycare centre 1 resident positive. In 有荃網壽星宮 1 resident positive. In North District 奇愛苑 1 resident positive. And the last RCG in 葵涌耀奇頤養院暨日間中心 is a daycare centre. 7 residents and 7 staff members tested positive. There are 3 RCHDs in Sha Tin. 香港神學會要揾宿舍 from the Stewards 鄭耀之中心 or 鋪亮曲and 怡欣山莊 1 resident from each of these homes tested positive. And I referred to one of the homes with more cases. It's in 葵涌耀奇頤養院暨日間中心 is an elderly home come daycare centre. There are altogether 89 residents and a dozen staff members on different floors. 1 care worker had 3 jabs and started to exhibit symptoms on the 10th of September, and the specimen collected showed a positive PCR result. The worker also tested RT positive on the same day, and then as of yesterday, 4 more staff members and 5 residents tested RT positive. This morning, 2 more staff members and 2 residents also tested positive. All affected residents currently reside in Area B, and the 40-odd residents in Area B will be sent to quarantine. As for schools, after days of holidays, we've recorded more cases. 2,886 cases have been reported by schools, 2,490 are students, and 389 are teaching staff. Altogether, 991 schools are involved. Schools have reported between 1 and 23 cases. There are 296 kindergartens, 370 primary schools, 324 secondary schools, and 28 special schools. So for the 2,800-odd cases, specimens were taken on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and this morning. As for schools making reports this morning, 777 schools reported more than 2 cases in the past 7 days. And for 23 schools, some classes have clusters of cases, and we have recommended 19 classes among the 23 schools to be suspended. They include 5 kindergartens, child care centers, 4 primary schools, 8 secondary schools, and 2 special schools. As for subvariants, among the specimen analyzed by the CHP, 77.7% of a specimen carried the BA.4.5 subvariant, and that's L452R, similar to the previous 2 days. and that's a high percentage. Among the L452R cases, 88.5% BA.5 and 11.5% BA.4. So percentage-wise, BA.5 cases now account for 68.8% of all local infections, and BA.4, 8.9%, BA.2, 12.1%, that's a low percentage, 3.8%, whilst the remaining cases are BA.2.2, 18.5%. That concludes my report.
通華 Group Hospital, Wang Tai Sin Hospital, the convalescence hospital division on September 12th, there are 4 patients who come down with COVID. The 4 patients have got 2 shots of COVID vaccines, and they are isolated in stable conditions. And the ward has already stopped taking on any more patients and visitation and have undergone disinfection. It's now time for questions. Please wait for the mic to come along. And before putting questions, please identify the organization you represent. Lady at the back, please. Doctors, cable TV, 52-year-old female deceased patient, how many shots has she had, and what is the cause of death? Is it related to COVID? And for the care home, Zone A and Zone B, is there any interaction? The care worker who was infected, was she responsible for Zone A, or was she responsible for both zones? From the web, we get to understand that from people coming under the Come to Hong Kong scheme can visit the premises without any vaccine pass. The vaccine pass would be for 180 days. Is this very much a loophole? Does the CHP see the merit of tightening up on this? Now, 5-year-old children would have to get vaccinated before going into these premises. Would there be any perception of double standard? Right, about the care home. Another one, Aura Nursing Home that we announced today. This Aura Nursing Home cum daycare center. There are 2 zones, A and B. Our understanding is that in Zone A and Zone B, the residents and the staff members are separated, and the infected people are in Zone B, and there are 2 nurses and 3 care workers who got infected, and there is a receptionist and a driver. Well, now for the 5 staff members who get in touch with the residents are working in Zone B, so the infection is very much taking place in Zone B. We have already taken measures to evacuate the other residents to quarantine centers. Second, about the vaccine pass, people coming into Hong Kong from overseas have to have 2 shots of COVID vaccines, but this requirement doesn't apply to the mainland, Macau, and so on, and Taiwan. The chief executive has already explained the situation this morning. People who have to subject to quarantine will get a provisional vaccine pass. Now, those coming under the Come to Hong Kong or Return to Hong Kong scheme will be able to get the vaccine pass from the post offices. Since COVID vaccines have been administered in the mainland and also in other parts of the world, and we are going to be standardizing the requirement for the vaccine pass. The details will be announced soon. As to the 52-year-old female, she had 2 shots of vaccine. Our clinicians have already looked into her case. She's cancer-stricken. It is at a terminal stage with a pretty high risk. So the main cause of death was actually the terminal stage of cancer, and that was the cause of death. Next, please. Any further questions? The gentleman at the back on the front, on the right. What the 52-year-old female deceased patient, is she the only one that is not related to COVID? For the others, are they chronically ill patients or cancer patients? Now, Dr. Ao, you mentioned the schools, and they have 1 to 23 cases. For schools with more cases, can you be more specific about them? 23 schools, 29 classes. How many schools have more than one class that they got infected? And also the nursing home, you mentioned the zone A and B, that are separated. The receptionist and the driver, are they in any way getting in touch with the residents? You said the staff members will get in touch with the residents. So are they getting in touch with the residents as well? Right, let me take the question about the school first. From the information, there are 19 schools that newly reported cases involving 24 classes that have cases of clusters, and they have to be suspended. There are some schools with more than one class. There are 4, and the first one is in Southern District, Aberdeen Industrial School, 1A, 2B, and 5C. They have 10 cases of COVID. 3中、4中 and 5中, and also Cannon Kindergarten in Kowloon Tong, in Chou Mui Zhou, there are 6 cases, and Yongtou Zhou there are 3 cases, and there are 21 students there, and also Sam Shui Tong Hyang Hui, P4B and P6. There are 4 cases altogether. The 4th one is the Kaisi Kindergarten in Ma Wan, in Chinwan, Kaisi Kindergarten in Chinwan. And there are 2 classes, K1C and K2A. There are cases of 3 each. For the other schools, there is only 1 class, and they got infected, and we have advised some of the classes to be suspended. For other schools, the cases are scattered in different classes, and there is no question of any clusters. And there are no classes that have to be suspended. As to the 10 elderly people, other than the 50-year-old female, they range in age between 69 and 95, and all of them are chronically ill patients, and they do have underlying conditions. There is an elderly person, 89-year-old male. Now, this senior citizen was unconscious in hospital. We had a scan administered on him, and there is some brain hemorrhage on both sides, and his death is more related to the brain hemorrhage than anything else. For the others, they are chronically ill, so they suffer from a higher risk. Right, let me supplement on the care home. Now, for the 7 staff members, 5 of them do not have any close contact with the residents because they are dealing with the care. And for the drivers and receptionists, they don't have any contact. But for the others, they do have contact with the residents, and they do wear their masks. Maybe I didn't myself sufficiently clear. Today, there are 23 schools with 29 classes that need to be suspended. 19 are newly reported schools. They didn't have any class suspension before. Of these 19, there are 24 classes. The 4 I mentioned registered more than 1 class that has to be suspended. There are 4 schools that have been advised to suspend some of the classes, and they have 1 to 2 additional classes that saw some clusters, and we have advised that some of the classes be suspended. Next, please.
This lady at the back. Good afternoon, Hong Kong Economic Times. I'd like to ask about schools. Between Friday and today, do you have the breakdown of the daily caseload for schools? And you mentioned 1 to 23 cases among those schools. Do you mean that one school recorded 23 cases? Can you tell us more about Come to Hong Kong, Return to Hong Kong schemes? How many persons have obtained the vaccine pass? And how many of them have received insufficient number of doses? And has any confirmed case been identified under the two schemes? And we've just had the Mid-Autumn Festival, and we recorded some 7,000 cases today. Does it reflect the activities during the holidays, and how many confirmed cases had no vaccination record? Thank you for your questions. 2,886 cases recorded today for schools. 489 came from specimens collected last Friday. So they tested positive in the afternoon of Friday, and 627 specimens taken on Saturday, and then 594 on Sunday, and 636 on Monday. For the remaining 424 specimens were taken this morning, and 116 cases were actually specimens taken before last Friday. About the school with 23 cases, I don't have information at hand, but there is no need to suspend any class, probably because of the cases happening sporadically in different classes. That could be a big school. And about the Come to Hong Kong and Return to Hong Kong schemes, the arriving travelers will be issued with a temporary vaccine pass. I don't have information about their vaccination record. And finally, about the trend of the epidemic. In the past 3 or 4 days, indeed, the daily caseload has come down a bit, but we must also bear in mind that despite the drop, the daily caseload still stands at 7,000, 8,000 cases, and that's a high level. Comparing to the caseload in May, we recorded only 200, 300 cases every day. So by comparison, I would say that the epidemic situation is still serious. Starting in mid-August, the figures began to climb from 5,000 to some 10,000 a day in early September. Now, the drop in the number of cases could be due to the long holiday during mid-autumn, and the number of people going for testing might drop correspondingly. And we have other indicators such as the instantaneous reproductive number of the Hong Kong U and sewage surveillance samples. These two indicators also indicated a drop. And still, for the Hong Kong U figure, it's still bigger than 1.1273. It means that the one confirmed case could infect more than one person, and we do expect this trend to continue for some time. As for sewage surveillance, we also recorded a drop in early September. At one point, we recorded 500,000 to 600,000 copies per litre of sewage, and in recent days the figure has dropped to below 500,000, still a very high level. In the past 3 months, when we look at the epidemic situation, there were times when we reached a plateau, or it climbed very slowly. In late July all the way to early August, for about 2 to 3 weeks, the daily caseload increased much more moderately, and the real-time reproductive number also dropped. But in mid-August, because of BA.5, the figures climbed again, and I think it would take a longer time, perhaps 2 weeks, for us to observe and determine where the epidemic trend is heading. One factor at play could be the Mid-Autumn Festival. Because of the long holiday, there could be more gatherings and social activities leading to more transmissions. And we must wait till later this week before deciding and checking whether the trend is indeed an upward one, and also BA.5, whether the percentage would climb even higher. At the same time, it's still a very high level. We urge everybody to be vigilant. I don't have information at hand, but I don't recall any because after all, these are arrivals from the mainland. They haven't been anywhere, and we have not recorded any imported cases from the mainland. Next question. This gentleman on the right-hand side. I'm from Ming Pao. Good afternoon. About schools, the daily breakdown stands at some 400-600 cases a day. So comparing to about 1,000 cases last week, it's been dropped by 50%. So perhaps this is affected by the long holiday and that fewer tests were done, and also the school holiday. Does it reflect a tapering trend of the epidemic? And about sewage surveillance, in May, June, you mentioned the level, and then you made a comparison with the level in July and August. And finally, about oral drugs, may I know how many medication has been dispatched, and by HA and by other organizations? And would the same drug be dispensed for those living with elderly patients to minimize the viral load? And do we have sufficient stock of the antiviral oral medication? Thank you for your questions. First, about schools. We tend to record more cases on Mondays because usually staff members and students may test positive during the weekend, and they would only report their positive cases to schools when they resume school day on Monday. And this is in fact the existing practice. On Mondays, we would give you figures relating to cases reported Monday and over the weekend. And although I mentioned some 600 cases on a daily basis, that's the number of specimens collected. I suppose some positive cases will only be reported to us tomorrow. At the moment, we don't see an apparent drop in the number of cases for schools. We need to observe a few days more to determine the trend. For sewage surveillance, the Environmental Protection Department collects over 100 samples territory-wide, and in its trough in May, we recorded about 200-300 cases a day. And there were 10,000 or less than 10,000 copies per liter of sewage. The figure, as we have recorded now, is much higher. It's close to 500,000, or just slightly below 500,000 copies. So that's roughly the level we recorded in mid to late March. As of the 8th of September, we prescribed the 2 antiviral oral drugs to 84,000 patients. 20,100 prescriptions have been made to patients visiting the A&E unit, and other prescriptions to patients through other appropriate channels. And according to our record, private doctors reported dispensing the 2 drugs to 3,400 patients in the private sector. And in fact, we have experts overseeing the taking of such drugs and the reactions. And for confirmed patients, as per the Department of Health's advice, they should be isolated. So whether we should prescribe such drugs to younger patients to avoid spreading the virus to older family members, I am afraid that this is contrary to the concept, because they should be in isolation. We have an expert team overseeing the usage of drugs. We have sufficient stock, and in light of the epidemic situation, we may procure more.
No further question, and that's it for today. Thank you all very much.